What evidence supports A? What evidence supports B? Are there weaknesses in either argument? What information are we missing? Is one side actually stronger? If neither side has a clear advantage, don't pretend to know. 4. Lesson. One of the biggest lessons is confidence is not the same thing as truth. Someone can speak with enormous confidence and still be wrong. Sextus argues that we should be particularly careful when people claim to know the true nature of things. Chapter 2. Arguments to have up your sleeve, the modes. 1. Main idea. Chapter 2 teaches tools for finding weaknesses in our certainty by showing how the same thing can appear differently depending on the observer, circumstances, culture, perspective, or assumptions. These tools are called the modes. They are designed to create opposing arguments and, when neither side can be established as superior, lead to suspension of judgment. 2. Explanation. Sextus presents several groups of modes. The 10 modes. The 10 modes show different reasons why our perceptions and judgments may differ. Among them are differences involving animals, human beings, the senses, circumstances, position, distance, and location, mixtures, quantity and arrangement, relativity, frequency or rarity, ways of life, customs, laws, myths, and philosophical beliefs. The basic question is, if different observers experience something differently, how can we confidently say what that thing is like in itself? 3. Example. Human differences. Imagine that the same food is delicious to one person but unpleasant to another. Who is experiencing the food correctly? The skeptic says, we can report how it appears to each person. But we should be cautious about claiming that we know exactly what the food is like by its nature. Sextus uses differences among humans to make this point. People differ in their bodies, preferences, reactions, and judgments, which can produce different appearances and evaluations. 4. Example, culture. The 10th mode is especially interesting. Different societies can have different customs, laws, lifestyles, religious/mythical beliefs, philosophical assumptions. What one society considers normal may be considered strange or wrong somewhere else. Sextus uses these differences to challenge the assumption that our own customs automatically reveal universal truth. Lesson. The deeper lesson isn't everyone is wrong. It is. Before believing your own conclusion, investigate what could make another person reach a different conclusion. This protects you from rash judgment, jumping to a conclusion before you properly examined the alternatives. What if the things you are most certain about are exactly the things you should question? Imagine discovering that someone can be intelligent, well-educated, and confident, and still be completely wrong. Almost 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Sextus Empiricus proposed a radical way of thinking. Don't rush to believe, don't rush to reject, and don't pretend to know what you cannot prove. In this video, we'll explore the ancient skeptical mindset and discover how questioning our assumptions can make us more rational, more open-minded, and less controlled by our own opinions. Introduction. We live in a world where everyone seems to have an answer. People tell us what is true, what is false, what is good, what is bad, who is right, and who is wrong. And because we hear these opinions repeatedly, we can easily mistake confidence for truth. But what if there is another way to think? In How to Keep an Open Mind, an ancient guide to thinking like a skeptic, the ancient philosopher Sextus Empiricus presents a powerful approach to thinking. Instead of immediately accepting a belief or rejecting it, the skeptic examines both sides, questions the evidence, and remains willing to say, I don't know yet. This isn't about doubting everything. It's about learning to distinguish between what appears true and what we can actually justify as true. Throughout this video, we'll explore the book's 6 chapters, from skepticism and the famous modes, to logic, reality, and ethics, and discover how an ancient philosophy can help us think more clearly in modern life. Chapter 1, Skepticism, the Big Picture 1. Main idea. Don't immediately decide that you know the truth. Investigate, compare opposing arguments, and recognize when the evidence does not justify a definite conclusion. Sextus divides philosophical approaches into three broad groups. Dogmatists believe they have discovered the truth. Academics believe the truth cannot be grasped. Skeptics continue investigating. The skeptic's position is not simply, "I don't know anything." Instead, the skeptic keeps investigating and avoids claiming certainty about things that are unclear. 2. Explanation. Sextus describes skepticism as a process. Opposing arguments equal strength, suspension of judgment, tranquility. If two sides of an argument appear equally convincing, the skeptic does not arbitrarily choose one. He suspends judgment. Importantly, this does not mean ignoring everyday experience. For example, if honey tastes sweet, the skeptic accepts. Honey appears sweet to me. But he does not automatically conclude. Sweetness must be an objective property of honey itself. The first is an experience, the second is a claim about the underlying nature of reality. 3. Example. Imagine two people arguing. Person A, "This decision is definitely the best choice." Person B, "No, the opposite decision is clearly better." Instead of immediately choosing A or B, the skeptical approach asks. Chapter 3, Talking and Thinking Like a Skeptic 1. Main idea. Speak according to how things appear to you, without claiming that your appearance or opinion is definitely the truth. A key skeptical expression is "not more," meaning roughly, "I don't know that this is more true than its opposite." When two opposing arguments appear equally persuasive, the skeptic gives neither one full assent. 2. Explanation. Imagine you hear two people arguing. Person A gives strong reasons for a particular conclusion. Person B gives equally strong reasons against it. A dogmatist might say, "A is definitely correct." The skeptic says, "At the moment, I cannot determine that A is more convincing than B." The important point is that the skeptic is not making a new dogmatic claim that nothing can ever be known. The skeptical phrases themselves are used tentatively and are allowed to fall away once their purpose has been served. 3. Example. Suppose someone says, "This person is a bad person." Instead of immediately accepting it, you might say, "That is how this person appears to me based on what I have seen, but I don't know the person's entire character." You're separating what appears to me from what is objectively true. 4. Lesson. Be careful with the difference between "it seems true" and "it is definitely true." The skeptic can live normally. Eat when hungry, drink when thirsty, follow ordinary customs, and use practical skills, without turning these everyday experiences into grand philosophical claims. Chapter 4, Going After the Other Philosophers, Logic 1. Main idea. Don't automatically trust an argument simply because it looks logical. Examine how its evidence and conclusions are justified. The chapter especially examines signs, things used to infer something that is not directly observed. 2. Explanation, signs. Sextus distinguishes two types. Reminder signs. Something previously observed together with another thing reminds us of it. Example. Smoke, fire. You've experienced smoke together with fire before, so seeing smoke reminds you of fire. Sextus says this kind of reasoning is accepted in ordinary life. Indicative signs. These are supposed to reveal something that cannot be directly observed simply through the nature of the sign. Sextus focuses his criticism on these because dogmatic philosophers use them to make deeper claims about things that aren't directly apparent. 3. Example, evidence. Imagine someone says, "The ground is wet, therefore it definitely rained." The wet ground is evidence, but there could be other explanations. Someone watered the ground. A pipe broke. A vehicle spilled water. It rained. The skeptic asks, Does the evidence prove the conclusion, or are there alternative explanations? That's the skeptical habit. 4. Deductive arguments. Sextus also examines arguments such as: every human is an animal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is an animal. He questions how universal statements such as every human is an animal are established in the first place. If you use individual cases to establish the universal rule, and then use the universal rule to establish the individual case, you can end up with a reciprocal dependence. 5. Induction. The chapter also challenges induction, moving from particular observations to a universal conclusion. For example, I have seen 1,000 white swans, therefore all swans are white. The skeptic points out: if you examine only some cases, you haven't established that there isn't an exception. If you try to examine every case, that may be impossible because there could be indefinitely many cases. 6. Lesson. Evidence is not automatically proof. When someone gives you an argument, don't ask only, does this sound convincing? Also ask, how did you get from the evidence to the conclusion? That question can reveal hidden assumptions and weaknesses. Chapter 5. Going after the other philosophers. Physics. 1. Main idea. We should be cautious about claiming certainty about the nature of reality, because even philosophers disagree about fundamental questions such as God, nature, and place. In the ancient context of the book, physics means the study of nature, roughly corresponding to what we would call natural science today. 2. Explanation. Sextus examines the claims of philosophers rather than simply accepting them. One major example is God. Different philosophers disagree about whether God is physical or incorporeal, what God looks like or is like, where God exists, whether God exists, whether God provides for everything in the universe. Because there is unresolved disagreement, Sextus argues that we should not confidently claim that we have grasped the true nature of God. He also examines the problem of place. Some philosophers argue that place exists, while others argue that it does not. The skeptical response is not simply to choose one side. Because both ordinary experience and philosophical arguments create difficulties, the skeptic suspends judgment. 3. Example. Imagine asking, what exactly is space? One person says space is something real that exists independently. Another says space is only a relationship between objects. A third gives another explanation. Instead of saying, my explanation must be correct, the skeptical approach says, the arguments on both sides need examination. I will not claim certainty before the issue is settled. 4. Lesson. Big questions require intellectual humility. When intelligent people have developed sophisticated arguments for centuries and the disagreement remains unresolved, confidence alone does not create knowledge. Chapter 6. Going after the other philosophers, Ethics. 1. Main idea. Chapter 6 questions whether anything is objectively good or bad by nature. Sextus examines whether there are things that are intrinsically good, intrinsically bad, or indifferent, regardless of people's opinions or circumstances. 2. Explanation. Sextus makes an important comparison. Things that have a natural physical effect tend to affect people similarly. Fire naturally warms. Snow naturally cools. But things people call good don't produce the same judgment in everyone. For example, different people may consider different things good. Physical fitness, wealth, pleasure, friendship, virtue, drinking, gambling. Even philosophers disagree about what counts as good. Therefore, Sextus argues that we cannot confidently identify something as good by nature merely because people or philosophers call it good. 3. Example. Imagine two people. Person A. Money is the most important good. Person B. Money isn't important, virtue is the real good. Person C. Pleasure is the good life. The skeptic asks, what objective criterion proves that one of these is correct? If there is no agreed criterion or demonstration capable of settling the dispute, the skeptic suspends judgment. 4. A very important point. Sextus is not saying that the skeptic becomes inactive or stops making choices. The skeptic still lives an ordinary life and can choose and avoid things according to ordinary experience, customs, and circumstances. The difference is that the skeptic avoids adding the rigid belief. This thing is absolutely and naturally good, while that thing is absolutely and naturally bad. 5. Why does this matter? Sextus argues that strong beliefs about what is absolutely good or bad can create disturbance. If you believe something is absolutely necessary for happiness, losing it can become terrifying. If you believe something is absolutely bad, encountering it can create much greater distress. The skeptic tries to avoid adding this extra layer of judgment. 6. Example. Imagine losing a large amount of money. You naturally feel upset. The skeptic doesn't say, "Don't feel anything." Instead, "I feel upset, but I don't have to conclude that losing money is an absolute evil that makes my life worthless." That distinction can reduce unnecessary mental suffering. 7. Lesson. Separate your immediate experience from the judgment you add to it. Something can be unpleasant without you needing to conclude, "This is objectively terrible, and I cannot be happy without its opposite." Conclusion. The greatest lesson of how to keep an open mind is simple. You don't have to be certain to be intelligent. Skepticism teaches us to pause before judging, examine opposing arguments, question our assumptions, and recognize the limits of our knowledge. Chapter by chapter, we saw the same powerful idea. Question your beliefs. Examine the evidence. Consider the opposite view. And when the evidence isn't enough, don't be afraid to say, "I don't know." Being open-minded doesn't mean believing everything. It means being willing to change your mind when better evidence appears. And perhaps that is one of the most valuable skills we can develop today, because the person who believes they already know everything has nothing left to learn. Keep questioning. Keep investigating. Keep your mind open.